Hi, I'm Donna Davis, along with the founder of Cole's Wild Bird Products, Richard Cole, who is here every Wednesday, first of the month at 3 o'clock to answer your birding questions. And today we have a great topic. We're talking about the enemy. This is one everybody battles. This is probably one of your main things that people ask you about, isn't it?
It is. No matter where you go or who you talk to, someone's going to ask you about stopping the squirrels. The birds go up and down, and there's all kinds of things about them, but the biggest problem with trying to feed the birds is how to stop the squirrels from not only eating your bird seed, but from destroying your feeders.
And you say there's 5 ways to win.
We have come up with 5 ways to win. The Squirrel Wars, 5 ways to win. And we'll go over each one of those and give you some good ideas about how to prevent the squirrels from getting to your feed and tearing up your feeders.
Yeah. Do you want to go through real quickly what the topics are, and then we'll come back to each one?
Sure. I think number 1 is not in order of effectiveness, but number 1 is relocation. You relocate the squirrels. Number 2, diversion feeding. Put out something else for the squirrels to keep them from coming to your feeder. And then there's squirrel-proof feeders. There's a lot of different squirrel-proof feeders out there, and we'll go over some of the types and talk about the effectiveness of each one of them. And then baffles. A lot of people use baffles to stop the squirrels from getting to their feeder. You have baffles that go on poles and baffles that hang over the feeders. We'll discuss those. And of course, then there's a good way to stop the squirrels is if the food is not what they like, they're not going to bother it. So you have foods that squirrels don't like. We'll cover those.
So there's a lot to get to, and then we're also going to talk about beyond squirrels. There's a couple more critters that you got to watch, right?
The squirrels aren't the only ones that want to get to your bird seed, so we'll cover a few of those at the end of this.
Yeah, and we also want to, like every Wednesday when we have a Facebook Live, we want you to ask your questions. I know you have a lot of questions about this topic, so feel free while we're here. You have a fantastic expert right here to be able to ask your questions. So we're monitoring your questions here on this computer, and we will get them to Richard. So let's go ahead and start with relocation. Oh, wait. We have something before we start that. We want to show a little video of how tough your opponent is.
Yeah.
Look at this. You recorded this, right?
I recorded that. That tree is over 11 feet away from that feeder.
And wait for it in slow motion.
What an athlete.
They are. They're amazing. And they're determined.
Boom. You see that and you wonder how you can stop these animals from getting to any feeder. They're very good at what they do. But there's ways.
Yeah.
There's ways. One of the ways is not putting your feeder right next to a tree.
That's true. 11 feet, though. You'd think it's far enough away.
You would think, but that was an Olympic quality squirrel right there.
Yeah.
Very few could have made that jump.
Yeah.
So
the relocation, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. There's, in talking with a lot of people, every now and then someone would say they want to just kill the squirrel to stop them. So no, just if you just have to get rid of them, relocate them. There's a lot of traps out there called safe traps or harmless traps, and there's a nice picture of one right there. That type of trap you can put out, put some bait in it, pretty much like the bird seed they're eating anyhow, and they'll go in and get them trapped, and you can take them 2 or 3 miles away, 4 miles if you feel uncomfortable with 2 miles, and drop them off somewhere in a wooded area. Do not do this in the dead of winter, and please do not do this if it's a nursing female.
How do you know if it's a nursing female?
Take a look at it.
You can tell?
You'll see the breasts. They'll be large. They'll be exposed, and you can tell it's nursing. They won't be sticking out through the fur if she's not nursing.
It's an unusually cruel
or
thing
if it's a male.
to do. Right.
So either way.
Yeah.
And you can just look at the trap, look under there, and see.
Yeah.
But that's just not the right thing to do. But otherwise, you can relocate them. They probably won't come back. But however, this is a temporary solution. You can take them away. They might not come back. Most likely will not come back. However, other squirrels will fill in the area. It's like taking a bucket of water out of a lake. For a brief instant, it's empty right there. It'll come in and fill in the hole. So you can work with it, but that's going to be the results is you're still going to have some squirrels come back. Diversion feeding. That's a nice way to go. It's easy. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to trap a squirrel and drive. You don't have to buy expensive stuff. You just have to provide some extra food for them. I've used this method several times. Here's a great picture
I love this
of
picture.
a squirrel eating corn, and that's fun too.
Yeah.
They always put on a
It's
show.
so much fun to watch them, yeah. And you know what? They're so territorial. They'll chase each other off
They
like, this
will
is
chase
mine.
each other. And there's
Yeah.
several versions of this type of feed. They have little cage-like devices where the squirrel has to crawl inside, or in a big jar. I saw one, and the squirrel climbs inside the jar and picks up the corn and eats it. Some of them that spin around like a little merry-go-round as
Yeah.
they get on it. And so diversion feeding is great. You can also put some other, like cheap bird seed, but you can also, if you be really nice to the squirrels, get them Cole's Critter Munchies. We designed
Perfect
that.
thing, yeah.
We designed it specifically for the critters. Squirrels,
Yeah.
number one, and we see a lot of rabbits eating it. Squirrels and all the other critters that come around will eat something that's in the Critter Munchies.
And it's like squirrel, I mean, what all is in it? It's like
There's peanuts in the shell, peanuts out of the shell,
Corn.
there's whole corn and sunflower and everything, pretty much everything they're coming to your feeder for, plus some goodies like the whole peanuts. They love whole
Yeah.
peanuts. And blue jays love the whole peanuts too. They'll come and get those and take them away.
And you'll
So-
see more than just the squirrels. We do have a comment already, though. So I'm going to read a couple comments. This is great. We've got
Okay.
more comments than usual. Diane Dorman Hutchins says, I've had good luck sprinkling cayenne around suet and mealworm dishes. They'll hop all over the area to avoid the pepper. We're going to talk about
we'll
that,
talk
too.
about that,
That's
yeah.
coming, yeah. And Elena Jim Bronson says, yes, that's exactly what I do, diversion feeding. They don't bother my other small feeders as long as they have their food. And also says, mine open the metal church feeder and sit in it to eat. I figure I'm feeding them so they don't chew up my house, but I do love watching them. And yeah, they're fun to watch.
They are fun to watch. I wouldn't want to go without the squirrels in my yard,
Absolutely.
but there's some feeders I really don't want to own either, so
Yeah.
for the birds. So.
Yeah, so we'll go to the squirrel-proof feeders now, right? And thank you for commenting and being part of our broadcast.
Squirrel-proof feeders have been around for a long time, and there's a lot of different types. The idea is that you have a feeder that the squirrel cannot eat from, and as opposed to using a baffle or something. One of the types of squirrel-proof feeders that I think has been most effective over the years is looks kind of like a metal mailbox or something, or a dumpster with a lid on it.
Do you wanna grab
I will
one?
show you one.
Yeah, I have this feeder, and it does work.
Now this is one of them right here. You can
Uh-huh.
open it up and put the food in it. It's steel, so
Yeah.
they're not going to chew this up. They can get all over it. They can't chew it up. Why does it stop them? When they get on it,
Ooh.
I just tore their feeder up. When they get on the feeder, their weight is much more than a bird, so it
Yeah,
closes
closes
that
it off.
down. You can see that I can reach in and get the food, but when they get on it, they can't get the food.
These are also great for the really big birds that'll come
You
raid
can
your feeder.
adjust.
Yeah,
You can adjust the weight on these things so that it's
Yeah.
much lighter, and something like 2 starlings or 2 grackles will get on it. It'll also close
Yeah.
it. And they hold a lot of food. They seem to work pretty well, and they're very effective against the
Yeah.
squirrels. And on this model, sometimes you might see one who's very good. Hang here and get a seed or two, but not really.
Yeah.
This is one way to go. That's good.
Yeah.
These may run somewhere between $40 and $60.
yeah,
But they're very effective. And you can put them in a place that you couldn't put other feeders.
Yeah.
Like within real close to a tree there or something, or a porch stick they can jump from.
that's true.
As long as they can't stand on something and reach through that treadle up there, you've got them.
Yeah.
It's going to work. I've used these effectively for many years.
And we've also got tube feeders, yeah.
Tube feeders, you've got ones that look like traditional feeders, but they'll have a wire mesh over them or a solid tube over them that moves with the weight of the squirrel to cover up the ports all up and down like the tube feeder. Same principle, just done differently.
And you have an example to
Just
show us.
so happens.
Just so happens, the Squirrel Buster Plus.
Squirrel Buster, this is one I like a lot.
This is great.
It's a big tube feeder. It works well. It's got an adjustment in there for the spring tension. As you can see, it looks like a regular feeder. There's the holes where the bird seed's at. But when a squirrel gets on it,
Yep.
you can see that. That comes down, and all the squirrel gets is solid metal. They can't get to the food.
Yeah.
These are also very effective, hold a lot of seed, and the birds feed off them very well, which is also important.
Right.
Squirrel-proof feeder, if the birds don't like it, you've lost right there.
That's true.
But this is another good way to do that. Here again, it's not inexpensive. I don't know exactly what they
Yeah,
are, but
that looks like a pretty durable feeder.
but they do well. They hold a lot of seed, and they're very durable. So that's an
Yeah.
excellent feeder. There's also a version of that feeder which has a metal wire screen around the outside of it that moves down. Similar type thing, same principle that everything drops down with the weight of the squirrel, but there's just several varieties of it. Now do we have other feeders?
That looks like it on the feeder. I know we've got some other things here that we can show, but I think that's it on the feeder.
So that's squirrel-proof feeders. There's a group of them that we saw maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago came out that used some type of electronics to shock the squirrels if they got onto the feeder or tried to get to the ports. Those are somewhat effective. Excuse me. They're somewhat hard to maintain. They're not super effective for a couple of reasons, but they're out there.
Yeah.
That's another way. And
Did you want to get some water?
no, I'll live through this, I think.
Okay.
And there's also a feeder that a lot of people have seen over the years called the Dro Yankees Flipper. And you've seen this on YouTube, I'm sure, all over the place, where the squirrel gets on the perch, and mechanically, when the perch comes down, it activates a motor, spins the perch around till the squirrel flies off. It's also a very good feeder, somewhat expensive, but it's fun to watch. I think one of the things I remember about it is someone got one, and they were excited, and it started stopping the squirrels. It stopped the squirrels. The person came back and complained. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, they don't ride it anymore."
Yeah. Yeah. If
Well,
you're
yeah,
getting it for the entertainment, guess what? They'll learn.
They just quit coming to
Yeah.
the feeder, and it
Yeah.
worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
But that person was unhappy with it.
They didn't like that little ride too much, huh?
And so there's feeders that work very well.
But they're not cheap, right?
They're not cheap. And let me mention right now, speaking of they're not cheap, when you're trying to stop the squirrels, don't go cheap. You can find stuff, baffles and feeders and the like, that are cheaper. You might be throwing your money away, because if it's too cheap, it's just not going to do the job it's intended to, because there's a lot of people in this market, they're making products as cheaply as they can, but keeping them effective. And some people don't worry about the effectiveness, they just want to make it cheap. And I have seen one of the metal feeders I was talking about earlier that had come out in some of the discount stores, and this is some years back, but it looked just sort of like what I was showing you, but it was smaller, obviously cheaper. Well, the squirrels just sit on it, reached right around it. It wasn't big enough to stop them from reaching around. And so it was totally ineffective. But
Yeah.
the store sold a lot of them.
Yes.
And people said these don't work.
Yep.
So
it's kind of
don't-
wasting your money and it's wasting
Yeah.
your seed. We do have a question, but I think that we're going to cover this in your
Okay.
next topic. Isn't your next topic? No, not baffles, but we'll cover it in the foods the squirrels don't like, I think.
Yes, we will.
The question is, how do we get rid of the nuisance starlings? And then somebody,
Oh,
and
we can work
Julia
on that.
Elliott also comments and says it's worth it to spend the money on a good squirrel-proof feeder.
Yeah.
They will pay for themselves in the long run. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, and she
Yes.
should know.
Yes, you should. Yes, you should. Another way is baffling the squirrels, stopping them, preventing them from actually reaching your feeder. Not a special feeder, but your tube feeder or your wooden feeder up on a post. You could, and just in time, there's a baffle.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. You put it, there's two ways to do it. On a pole, the squirrel tries to come up the pole, can't get around the baffle to get up to your feeder.
And your pole must be, 5 or 6 feet tall before
That
it even
pole
works.
should be 5 feet. You might be able to get away with 4 feet. Just remember, a good squirrel off of a hard surface can jump 4 feet without too much trouble. So
Yeah.
up to a tray and catch the edge of it. If it's got a rock or something close by and you can get a good angle and jump off the rock, it might be able to make 5 feet. that's a good height. A lot of people said it don't work, and the feeder's like 3.5 foot up. The squirrel jumps right up to the
Right.
up past the baffle. So you want to make sure it's tall enough. And the other thing you want to make sure of is that you don't put a feeder with a baffle on it close to something they can jump from. As we showed earlier in the jumping from the tree, if it's a tree or something rigid like a deck railing, they can jump and bypass the baffle won't work.
Yeah.
It'll do its job, but they're not going to go that route. They'll take the easy route and jump to the feeder. So you
Yeah.
have to make positioning important.
And you've got some examples of baffles. Did you want to show those?
Here is a typical, or maybe not typical, this is a good squirrel baffle. And it's even got some decorative scallops at the bottom.
Oh,
And it's got a hole through it. It's made to go on a large pole, not a shepherd pole. They're much too short.
Yeah.
I'll show you another way to stop squirrels coming up a shepherd pole. But this is made to put on a pole that's, you don't need it 4.5, 5 feet high. And it's too big for the squirrel. They can climb the pole because they can get their hands around it and climb. They can't get their hands around this to grip it well
You
enough.
call it their hands. I'm the same way.
Well, they have
They
hands.
are hands, yeah.
And so they get up here and they just can't. They'll reach and try to. And
It is fun to watch too.
It is, and
Them
I
try to get around the
find
baffle.
no
Yeah.
matter how long this thing's been out there, they will inevitably come up and try to.
Yeah.
They'll climb up the pole and go up
Yeah.
in here, and you'll see the tail hanging
I
out
know.
while they're
I see that,
investigating,
yeah.
and then they come out and say they can't
So
do it.
cute, yeah.
Now, I do want to show one other baffle like this because, as we're going to talk about later, squirrels aren't the only thing eating your birdseed.
Yeah.
Nighttime.
That is one big baffle you have there, Richard.
We can't even see the top of that. There we go.
That was baffle, yeah.
Now, what is this for? Raccoons.
Which we're going to talk
Raccoons
about
are
later. Yeah.
excellent climbers. They can go right around a squirrel baffle because they have to, their feet, I'll call them feet too, right around the pole, and they can reach up and around and grab the pole above it because they're that long. They've got the
yeah.
span. Then they just go right, they climb right around your squirrel
Wow.
baffle. So if you
Yeah.
have raccoon problems, you go with a longer baffle of this type. This
Yeah.
is long enough to stop the raccoons. Of course, it'll stop the squirrels also. So
Yeah.
good way to go if you have
Yeah.
raccoons in
Great
the area.
advice.
And,
So we have another question while we're
good.
on this. So are these poles we would get in the plumbing or electrical department? Should you go to a specialty birding place for those poles, or can you just use a pole that you might find?
You could go and get something from a piece of pipe from the depot or something. However, what are you going to put on top of it? If you've got a feeder that's made to go on a pole, it probably is made to go on a pole that they sell or one of the standard poles. You'll find those at really at your bird stores. Some of the other stores carry some poles, and they're usually bigger around. They're not little bitty skinny things, but they're big around. I've seen people use water pipe or gas pipe from the depot type stores.
Right.
They'll get a 6-foot piece, they'll pound it in the ground, they'll put a mounting on the top and screw a wooden feeder to it. That's okay too.
Yeah.
And these squirrel type baffles, the can I showed you, and some of the other flat ones will have collars that will go down small enough to hold onto that piece of pipe and that will work. Just make sure it's tall enough to get the job done.
Yeah.
It may not be the prettiest one around, but they'll serve a function. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then you were about to move on, weren't you?
I was.
Did you cover everything that you wanted to cover? And then we'll
And
go to
we'll
the
get-
foods?
We're going to get the foods.
Okay. This is a good one.
Yeah.
Because this applies to a lot of different animals, right?
Yeah, because you can use all the baffles you want to, and they can be effective. You have to worry about where you put the feeder, and that's difficult. Even in my own yard, I found that very difficult because I want to be able to see the birds. That means I'm looking off my deck, and obviously a squirrel's on my deck and can get right to the feeder. Or in my yard, there's trees close by, and I have a little rock wall. Well, I put one near the rock wall, and they could get on that rock, good grip, jump to the feeder. So position was a problem. I couldn't put it where I wanted it. So it'd be nice to be able to put the feeder where you want it and still stop the squirrels. There's a way to do that. Simply put a food the squirrels won't eat in the feeder. Yeah, right, that's not possible. It is possible. One of the foods I'll mention is safflower seed. Kohl's has safflower seed. We've been selling that for years. And the main reason to sell safflower seed is most squirrels won't eat it. If they do, they eat it sparingly. They just don't like it for whatever reason.
And it's great for the starlings and all that. They don't really like it too. I love it.
Yes,
for that
side
reason.
benefit is most blackbirds, starlings and grackles, do not like safflower. Don't really know why, don't matter. They don't like it. So you can put safflower in, a lot of the birds will eat it, but the squirrels will tend to leave it alone. The blackbirds and starlings will tend to leave it alone. And that's a great benefit. You will find that some of the other birds will have a little problem with it. You can't compare safflower to like cold sunflower meats because everybody loves sunflower meats. However, the safflower is still a good seed. Cardinals absolutely love safflower, so that's the number one bird that's going to come to your feeder. That's a good thing. Now, you can also see other birds there will come and eat it, but not quite as many birds as you'd get with sunflower meats. So safflower is a good way to go. It's available in a lot of stores that carry the coals.
Yeah. And so, of course, you want to talk about the hot meats.
Absolutely.
And you kind of came up with that whole thing because of the
Yes.
squirrels, right?
Absolutely. This was something that Coles came up with a long time ago. And I love this package because it just looks so nice.
know.
I want
Yeah.
You should buy it for the package. But these, you can see they've got that little reddish tint. We've talked about them before. And this is pure sunflower meats. Everybody loves it. Every bird will eat it. And so will the squirrels. But we coated this, infused this with habanero chili oil. High concentrate habanero chili oil. So it's extremely hot to the taste for mammals. Birds can't taste that. They don't have the receptors to pick up that heat. So they eat it with no trouble, but the squirrels and other mammals will leave it alone.
And for the most part, and as Elaine Cole, your daughter, has said before, some people say, oh my gosh, my squirrels ate it.
Yeah.
If an animal is hungry enough, it will eat anything.
Yes.
So
Yes.
nothing is foolproof. None of these
No.
things are foolproof. But for the most part, yeah, they don't like it. They won't eat it. But it doesn't hurt them. We want people to know it doesn't hurt
I've
them.
been feeding that in my yard for over 10 years. And I think one year I had a batch of squirrels that came out and they seemed to eat it fairly well. It didn't seem to be their favorite thing, but they ate it, 2 or 3 of them. And I thought, well, this is not good. But within 6 months, those squirrels had moved on or died off or died from heat or something, and they weren't a problem anymore.
Right.
The next batch of squirrels that came along, no problem. And since that period of time, I've never had a squirrel who sits and eat it. We do hear that every now and then, so I want you to know that it is possible. It's probably temporary. It may be a really young squirrel or extremely hungry squirrel. That'll go away, and this will be a really effective product. The great thing is you can put it where you want it.
Right.
So that makes it, this is what I use on my back porch.
And you have all kinds of products that you can mix with the hot, or to make hot meats, right? Yeah.
Well, you can use the hot meats totally by themselves.
Right.
And now we do have a product, speaking of foods that squirrels don't like. You might have your own special blend of food that you want to feed. Who knows what it is, doesn't matter. But the squirrels will eat it. We have flaming squirrel seed sauce. It's really
There it is.
right on
Yep.
cue. Look at this. And
Right.
of course, it's the same type of oil that we use to infuse the sunflower meats for hot meats. And we knew people wanted to be able to put it on some of their own seed. So we bottled this stuff. There again, extremely potent. So you put it in, you put it to your own seed, you mix it up, put it out in your feeder. You can make your own squirrel-resistant food with that.
Yeah,
And
with it,
very
with any
popular
type.
product.
Yeah,
Very
and
popular.
just to let you know, Elena Jim Bronson says he wanted to comment and laugh along with this, saying no taste receptors, just heartburn.
Yeah, maybe a little heartburn, yeah.
Yeah, and so that they won't do it again. Okay, so now we're going to go to some other animals, right?
Yes. Squirrels aren't the only ones. They're the biggest problem, but not the only ones that come to your feeders.
Right.
So, do we have a shot of one of the other animals?
Oh, there
look
it
at
is,
there.
surveillance camera.
I
That's
call-
your video, right?
This is in my backyard. There again on a shepherd-style pole, which is very hard to put a baffle on because they're short. But I'll show you how to get around that in a few
He's
minutes.
just having no problem.
None whatsoever.
None.
Just sitting there in the
Just,
tray,
like, enjoying
eating all of my
that,
birdseed.
like a
Yeah.
little thief at your
Yeah.
feeder. I love it.
So they'll be around too. Now, raccoons do not like hot meats. They don't like that heat either because they're mammals. They can taste it.
Yeah.
And it's a problem for them.
So
Use the hot
is that
meats.
what you did right after that? After you got that video?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Now, on the baffles, I didn't mention one of them, and we're going to mention that right now.
Okay.
Because of that picture right there. At nighttime, the raccoons come.
The tough bird feeder guard. I love it.
Yeah, and this right here, we've shown this before. This is a device that simply clamps around your pole, even a little shepherd pole, which I'd mentioned, usually are too short to put a regular baffle on because they'll jump above the baffle. This right here, you put right under the feeder on the shepherd pole or bigger pole and turn it on. It's got a battery, and it clamps on the pole easily. It will shock the squirrel if it grabs this tube part right here. And it's got to grab this to climb, and when it does, it'll give it a little, we call it a training shock.
But it won't hurt.
No, it'll startle them.
Yeah.
It'll scare them. They'll jump. It's like the dog training collars. It's called the Tough Bird Feeder Guard. It's another way to stop them from getting up, especially the small poles, the shepherd poles that you can't use a baffle on.
Must have been somebody really smart that invented that.
It must have been. I'll give him credit.
And that is available for purchase, correct?
Absolutely, in a lot of locations.
Yeah. Okay. So what else do we have? So we've talked about, there's the picture of another creature that we have to worry
There
about.
is one more critter that comes, if you stay up at late and watch when it comes to your feeder, it's amazing what will come out of the woods and come to a feeder. But we have one more shot we'd like to leave you with. This right here. Lots of luck stopping this from getting to a feeder. This deer, here again in my backyard, just walked around the feeder on his hind legs. I thought it looked like a dog that had been trained to walk on his hind legs, and ate the birdseed.
Yep,
And,
I love that picture.
It's hard to stop. And
love it.
quite frankly, I wouldn't want to stop that.
No,
that was
that's
worth the sight. It can eat all at once.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. They probably have to be pretty hungry to do that.
Yeah.
And it's probably not, natural, but, gosh, how beautiful.
Yeah, and it's clever.
Yeah.
It figured out a way to get to the food, so good for it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I think that we feed birds, those of us who love to do it, is you love to watch the animals and watch nature, and you can't get upset with something like that because it's just like that you're getting a chance to see how resourceful animals in nature are.
And they are very resourceful, and they're very determined to get to your food. Hopefully, these 5 ways will give you some ideas how you can win the squirrel wars.
Yeah.
And have a little more food left over for you and the birds.
Yeah, these are great. It's great advice, and Richard is here every Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month at 3:00 in our studio to give you all kinds of advice about birds. He's such an expert. You've been doing this for years, and I've been watching the birds for so many years, right?
Yeah, long time.
Bring so much education to people, so this is a great place for any of your comments or questions. I think we have, we have another question. So
right.
we only have time for, I think, one more.
Right.
How about rats? Does the hot meats work for rats?
Yes, it is a mammal.
Yeah.
It will work for them. And especially on the ground, they tend to leave that stuff alone. They may taste it a little bit, but if you have rats climbing up a feeder or eating seed on the ground, this will slow them down. They don't like it very much. And any mammal that tries to eat this will get the burn that you taste when you eat something hot, and they pretty much leave it alone.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to attract rats
No,
when you're feeding.
no.
Yeah, that is something you just do not want. So then we have Elena Jim Bronson says, thanks, I enjoyed this. Great. I hope you'll share it with your friends, especially if they are birders. I think that Richard, you come on and it's such a great resource. I learn things all the time, when we do this broadcast and really enjoy it. So next month, I think we're gonna maybe show you some more pictures from our calendar. People send in photos, and we're getting that calendar ready. So watch for that. Your 2019 birding calendar. It's beautiful.
It is. I would like to say I did it all myself. I did not. Some really talented people put this thing together.
Yeah.
And it's really nice. I'm not a big calendar fan. I use this when I put it at home because I like what the job
I do
they've done. It's
too.
beautiful.
I do too. It
Yeah.
is a beautiful, and it's full size. I love the look of it, and I just love to look at birds at the different seasons. And thank you all for sending in such beautiful pictures. That
Yeah,
made
it's
into
got
this
y'all's
calendar.
pictures in it.
Yeah, that's what's
Our
fun.
customers
All
have
the
sent those
Coles
in.
fans.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next month, first Wednesday of the month at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Thank you.